The September 5th, 2024 Des Moines City Council Study Session is now called to order. Next, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Nutting will lead us tonight, so please stand if you're able.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Let the record show that 6 council members are present tonight. Councilmember Mahoney was not able to connect, so he will not be joining us tonight. And do I have a motion to excuse? Councilmember Nutting.
So moved.
Second. Deputy Mayor Steinmetz, thank you. All in favor? 6-0. Thank you. So is there any correspondence not previously received by council?
No, Mayor.
All right, thank you. So now it's time for comments from the public. And because this is a study session, we're going to be hearing comments that just address the items on the agenda for tonight. Other subjects will be heard at upcoming business meetings. So we ask that as you approach, that you please keep your comments respectful and recognize that anyone who is speaking or acting in a disruptive manner will be removed from the meeting. So when you come to the podium, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name and your city of residence. So the first person that we have signed up to speak tonight is Lynn Cashman.
Good evening, Mayor. Oh, I guess I don't need a question. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. My name is Lynn Cashman, and I live in the Marina District of Des Moines, and I'm also a member of the Human Services Committee. And on behalf of the Human Services Committee, I want to thank the council for your strong support of human services over the years. And as you do the challenging work of creating a budget for the city for the next budget cycle, I ask that you do not cut the amount that you allocate to human services to support all of the nonprofits in our community. This money is so very important in order to support our most vulnerable residents. Our committee is currently reviewing all the applications that we've received for the next cycle, the 2025-26 cycle funding. And we've been doing this work since April. And we have spent many hours in review, and I can assure you that the Human Service Committee works diligently to ensure that the money we recommend for the next 2-year funding cycle goes to those nonprofits that support the programs that meet the criteria and priorities to support our most vulnerable residents. I'm proud to live in a city that has been a strong supporter of human services. The need in the city is great. We have a large number of people in the poverty level. And I ask that you continue to show your support for our residents with the greatest needs by keeping human services spending in your 2025-26 budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cashman. Next up, we have Diane Tucker.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members and members of the public. My name is Diane Tucker, and I'm a resident of Des Moines, and I'm also a flight attendant for United Airlines, and I have been for going on 57 years. And I currently serve as the benefits chairperson for the flight attendants at United Airlines, and there's approximately 30,000 of them. And on that committee, I oversee a budget of about $275,000. So I know a bit about budgeting, as do I think most of the people sitting here in the audience. I want to talk to you because I've reviewed the projections of the deficits for the next 5 years that has been proposed by the council or by the staff for the council. We think that some realistic decisions need to take place, both with the staff and with the council, to begin to prioritize for the citizens of Des Moines. versus advancing projects such as the Stairs to Nowhere and the ferry that very few citizens in Des Moines use. We support our first responders, and we will continue to do so. Public safety, roads, parks, and recreations, these are the issues that we want addressed. We also want the city staff and the council to develop long-term plans to promote business interest by offering short-term incentives to small businesses. But at the same time, cuts must be made to non-essential projects and staff positions. Additionally, across the board, cuts must be considered, and they should stay in place until the deficit is standard, has reached its plateau. Absent this type of strategy, the consolidation of or outsourcing of services will be necessary to be considered by the council, possibly to our neighbors in the Burien, SeaTac, and Normandy Park area. Frivolous projects such as the Stairs to Nowhere and the passenger ferries and hiring consultants for every project, these resources should immediately be reallocated to public safety. There are approximately 12,550 households in Des Moines, and many of them are middle and lower incomes households. Voters in Des Moines must take action to defeat the lift levy as it stands today. Okay, that'll do it. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Diane. Next up, I have Victoria Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council, and the public who is here and watching. I'm Victoria Andrews, a resident of Des Moines. The budget presentation attachment stated, quote, "There are no budget strategies or budget cuts reflected in this draft," and also expenditures in the general fund are projected to exceed revenue by about $4.6 million in 2025. A number of staff suggestions have been listed to close the gap, with a clear caveat that additional measures will need to be undertaken. I know many residents enjoy and would prefer getting a full-color hard copy of the City Currents, but it's a quarterly and changes occur after publication. Meanwhile, the City Manager's report is weekly, therefore timely, and provides active links to more information. I do hope eliminating Currents is one of the suggestions you will approve. Online links to sign up for classes, etc., is preferred over Facebook QR codes. As you know, not everyone chooses to use social media, myself included. Interestingly, today I received an email from Parks and Rec with links to sign up for classes, but the one I was interested in didn't show up when I tried to find it, so the site needs more work. For those without computer access, and I've met a few, copies of the weekly report can be placed in public places, and residents could be offered the option of a small subscription fee to get them mailed to their homes. So that's an easy one. And I'm concerned about an item not on the list that the council and many in the community hold dear, already been mentioned. I suspect I know why. Staff report to the city manager and he reports to you. So I believe it's time to add that item to the list of potential cuts and discuss them all with full transparency. Hint, here it is. Many people would love a passenger ferry, but does Des Moines need it right now more than fiscal stability? Is it essential? Staff was able to secure federal funding of $160,000 to conduct an environmental analysis and community engagement to access the feasibility of a planned electric ferry. Please consider a hold on Mr. Phillips' monthly consulting fee until those findings have been concluded. That would save an additional $66,000 and help steer the ship, pardon the pun, forward when our finances are in better shape. A 3 to 5 year strategic plan is absolutely essential right now. Can our legislators move the dial to eliminate the property tax cap next session? I want to believe that you all take your fiduciary role seriously, but clearly you are still putting wants before needs. And while I understand how much you appreciate Mr. Phillips' contributions, please don't put your long-standing relationship with him over your responsibility to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Next up, Chuck Coleman.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, City Council, Interim City Manager, staff, and our neighbors watching this. For the record, Chuck Coleman, Redondo Beach Drive South. I'm speaking to you tonight representing the members of the Redondo Community Association. Our group has grown substantially over the summer, had a community garage sale, and fed nearly 150 of our community members at our annual barbecue. We continue to, and actually some of our members are here tonight. I'd like for them to stand while I continue reading here, please. We continue to live by our mission statement to strengthen social cohesiveness and advocate for the well-being of our neighborhood and local and regional governments. Our community continues to be very supportive of any efforts made to improve public safety in our community. We support our police department and particularly the efforts of our new police chief. We participate in police advisory committee, attend and host police support events, and actively advocate for public safety initiatives. We've expressed our concerns for the financial health of our city for nearly 2 years. We've discussed financial icebergs, belt tightening, and making sure we did not spend more than we were given. We advocated for transparency and public engagement to increase trust in our elected officials. While we acknowledge that positive changes have been made in the city, we realize that many challenges facing us today, which the decisions made tonight will affect our city for years to come. Our city continues to grow, and we recommit our efforts to help the city grow responsibly. Council is now at a major decision point. On the budget, it appears that our spending is not aligned with a strategic plan. Actually, we don't have a strategic financial plan. This was even obvious to the 3 of the candidates for city manager. Given the challenges of the budget, we've got a list of things that we can talk about offline or in a smaller group, but I want to move on since my time is limited. On the city manager selection, our guidance is that there is no substitute for experience. Let me say that again. There is no substitute for experience, especially given where our city is in its growth cycle. Do we select a person with 20 years experience as a city manager, manage transformational projects, strong on community engagement, fresh eyes on old problems, or do we select someone with no city manager experience whose stated job is to make the council and staff look brilliant and did not mention the words community engagement? I will close by asking a question. Is the city ready to embrace the future and restore public trust by honest public engagement, or continue to kick the can down the same old tired road? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck. Next up, Melanie Barlow.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and City Council, and members present. Melanie Barlow from Redondo area. Thank you so much for the recaps presented so far. Mine is much more simple. We understand that the city is facing a funds deficit and that the city put forth a special levy lift to help cover that deficit, which was failed. We are told that the current city funds deficit may now affect police coverage affecting our safety. Despite the deficit funds being communicated by the city is still moving forward with plans for ferry expansion and upgrades and harbor steps and other activities. I enjoy ferries. I love living in the Northwest, but when I have to look at ferries versus public safety and some of the other higher priorities, I know that we will select the most important one. I think that safety, police, and incentives for retaining the police that we have must be the #1 priority. We live in South Seattle. It's rough down here. It's got to be a priority. I also agree that parks and recreation for our community youth should be a focus and priority. Investing in our youth will benefit us all. Plus, it's just a good and right thing to support. Racing at Redondo is still an issue. I know that budget is also considering additional traffic help down there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Melanie. Next up, Kay Van.
My name is Kay Van from Redondo Beach area. I want to echo everyone about the support of our police, small businesses, and our community safety. And spending money on this, it's mind-blowing to me. When you want to spend millions and millions of dollars on stairs that probably 10% of people is going to use. So that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kay. We do have a packed room tonight, but I do offer, if you did come here tonight specifically to make comment and you didn't realize that you needed to sign up, I will allow you to come and speak, but brevity is magical, so. Did you expect to speak tonight? Oh, no, only if you expected to come to speak tonight, you didn't realize that you needed to sign in. This is not a spontaneous offer for speech. If you came specifically tonight to make public comment and you didn't realize you needed to sign up, I will allow you to speak, but not spontaneous.
Point of order,
Yes, sir.
we've always offered a gracious invitation to anyone who did not sign up.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is your name? Teresa, you may come up. Thank you. Please state your name.
Teresa Lako.
Teresa.
Yeah, I live in Redondo, and I am concerned because our park is not ADA compliant. I wasn't going to talk tonight because I knew this was all about finances, but the park has something to do with finances. I just want to say that I don't understand why we're building new things when we haven't taken care of the things we already have. And I want to be a voice for those who are in wheelchairs and things like that, because they're important, and I just feel a responsibility to just be a voice for them because they can't use our park. And I just think that there should be a way just to make a small paved area just to get their wheelchair in the park. It's not a lot to ask, and it is a law that the park is supposed to be ADA compliant, and it is not. And I have been unsuccessful talking to the planning people about getting this done. So I'm hoping that you all care about those less fortunate than us, and please do that for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. All right, thank you. So moving on, we're moving on to our discussion items. And I'm excited for the first item on the agenda tonight. It's the swearing in of our new chief, Ted Boe. So very excited to do this. And tonight, our judge, Lisa Leone, is going to be doing the swearing in. So come on up. And if you've got an introductory statement to make, or if the chief would like to say anything, I will open the mic for you over there.
I think I'll just be real quick. It is truly an honor to serve this community and to join you as your police chief. And I also think it's really an honor to see how many of the people who work for your police department took the time out to be here. Some on duty, some off duty. But to you guys, I will give you my all. You have my word. So thank you.
All right. Raise your right hand. Repeat after me. I, Theodore Boe, having been duly appointed to the office of Chief of Police, do solemnly affirm that I will faithfully and impartially perform the duties of this office as prescribed by law and to the best of my ability, and that I will support the government of the United States and the laws of the state and the ordinances of the city of Des Moines. Congratulations.
can steal the mic one more time. When you get me, you also get my whole family. So one of my daughters couldn't get out of cheer practice today, but Amelia is my other daughter, and my wife, Marcy. Thank you, guys.
I did want to offer any opportunity for a photo op here. This is a pretty big deal. So if you would like a photo with your family and the judge, of course, she just took her robe off, but I would like to offer you that. So if you'd like a photo today with that, if somebody would offer to do that for them. Welcome, Chief. We're so happy to have you. Yeah, excellent. Okay, next up is a discussion of our city manager selection process. So if you'll notice that the agenda was published that this would be the third item, but there are a lot of people here tonight waiting with bated breath, I think, for this discussion. And so we moved it to number 2 tonight before the budget presentation. So I'm going to hand the baton over to our assistant manager, AJ Johnson-Newton, and she'll give us a little summary and move on to the next items inside. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I think the excitement of this discussion has just overtaken me. So, good evening. Good evening, council community. My name is AJ Johnson-Newton, and I am happy to announce that we are at the point in the process where the council is preparing to make their selection for the next city manager. Before we get started on the slides, I just want to thank everyone for their participation. It's been a long but very productive process. In the next few slides, I'll recap all of the various twists and turns that we went on through this to get to this place. And I do want to give a special thank you to the Waterland blog for streaming the community meet and greet. I think that increased the engagement. I also want to acknowledge that the council had been very clear through this process that they wanted to invite the public into this process to provide inputs. And so I want to acknowledge that I think we hopefully met that need of the council and the community, and I thank you for all of the comments we received online, the comment cards, the emails. The community has been very engaged in this process, so you all deserve a big hand for yourselves. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge the 4 finalists and express our gratitude for the time and effort that they took to go through the process. It's not easy to put yourself out there, even in this position. So, all right, next slide, please. So just to recap, as I like to do, so we started off, the council selected an executive search firm to conduct the city manager recruitment. We went through, they reviewed the job description, they adopted a new salary schedule, they participated in listening sessions with the consultant, and then later they provided input to the consultant and the HR team at the city to put together our city manager recruitment brochure. The posting went live on May 30th and it closed on June 30th, and 29 applicants applied. From there, the council selected 13 semifinalists, and those semifinalists were tasked with responding to 20 written supplemental questions and 4 online self-interview questions. Out of the 13, 11 provided the requested supplemental materials, and from there, 4 candidates were moved forward to the on-site interview phase. Next slide, please. So those 4 finalists were Katherine Caffrey, Michael Eklund Graham, Daniel Ernestine, and Shannon Kelly Fong. And so the finalists participated in a 2-day on-site interview process. It was pretty rigorous. It started with a city tour. They participated in 3 panel interviews, one with the senior leadership team, a community panel selected by the city council, and then of course they were interviewed by the city council. And they also participated in 3 meet and greets. They did a meet and greet with the staff, which I also want to commend. I think we ended up with about half of our staff population that attended. A citizens advisory committee, and then of course the Des Moines community. And then additional evaluation elements that the council was provided for insights for them to be able to make an informed hiring decision. Of course, they received the comment cards back from the participants in the meet and greet. debriefs and the evaluation notes from the people that were on the interviews. DISC assessments, which is like a management behavioral assessment that each candidate completed, references, and then, of course, our standard background checks. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to turn it over to the City Council for discussion on their candidate selection.
Thank you. So the way we'll work this tonight is I would like to open it up for comments. If you have comments, is that we are going to be taking a vote tonight, so this is an opportunity to substantiate your vote. And there will be another opportunity, as always, for discussion after the second, right? But it would be preferable that you would state most of the information that you want to share during this portion before we make the motion. There will be a motion after this discussion. So, all right, we'll start with Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
I just wanted to ask if Councilmember Mahoney's statement is going to be read.
Yes, so I'm going to give.
I thought it would be appropriate to lead with that, and then we.
I was going to leave it for, right, I've got it in order there. I'm going to let all of you speak first, so. Does nobody wish to make a comment about their substantial? Okay, if nobody wishes to.
Well, I do. I was just trying to make sure my colleagues had an opportunity to do so first, but particularly if nobody else wants to say anything, I can't resist. During the course of this whole process, there's one candidate that sort of stood out at every step of the way. And she stood out because of her experience, long-term experience, in almost every aspect of running a city. And you just kind of look at her, and you know that she's ready to do this job. Her name is Katherine Caffrey. During the whole process, she was quickly identified as one of the semifinalists, and then when we broke it down to 4, again, there was a clear break on the top 4 based upon the credentials that we had seen to that point. And so that made that separation pretty easy to do. But then as the candidates met the public, they went through a series of interview panels. The feedback that we got was overwhelmingly in favor of Ms. Caffrey. She clearly was the most qualified. She clearly was the one that stood out from the crowd. She did an enormous amount of research on the city. She came to us with proposals of how to get started, and I think that she really separated herself from the process. So I hope that she'll be our candidate at the end of this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris.
I want to thank the public and especially the Citizens Advisory Committee and the community panel and the staff. They provided tremendous candor and, you can say a lot in just a couple of sentences. It was incredibly useful. And I read through this stuff and I thought, man, why couldn't this be the default mode in our public meetings? Because it was tremendously valuable. I will also thank the 4 finalists because they were analyzing us in depth as much as we were looking at them, and all 4 of them provided laser-focused commentary on improvements to the city. They were remarkably consistent in their critiques. And so regardless of how much effort they put into it, there are obvious things that just stick out. And I am holding on to their thoughts because they are professionals and they had extremely good feedback that we should take seriously. And one other thing, it was consistent with what the staff and the community panels and the Citizens Advisory said. Basically, there is an almost unanimous critique about how to improve the city. I just wonder if we're actually listening. But the process had its ups and downs. I wish it had gone differently in some small ways, but the fact that there is that unanimity, yeah, you know what I'm saying, as to how people see the city, regardless of ideology, really it should be a sign of hope. If we're willing to take that constructive feedback. And so I want to thank everybody. I mean, you know, the community representatives in this room, the staff. Yeah, bang up job. Thank you.
Okay. So next I would like to read Councilmember Mahoney's statement. And because he's not here, of course, well, anyway, even if he were, never mind about that comment. So I'm going to read his statement, and we'll move forward after that. My apologies to the residents of Des Moines for being unable to attend today's meeting. Despite efforts to attend, there simply isn't the technology to allow me to do so from the Pacific Ocean along the Alaskan coastline. One of the most important responsibilities we have as council members is to hire or fire our city manager. As someone who has hired executive level positions in the past and present, I have gained experience on what qualities one should look for in a key leader. This person should have presence and demonstrate the ability to interact at all times with anybody and everybody. This person should have strong leadership experience and show past examples of stellar performance on key objectives. This person should be a delegator, not a doer. This person should always be focused on the big picture and out of the weeds. This person must possess strong fortitude and the ability to be candid and frank when necessary. To say no if needed and yes within reason if unpopular with some. This person must be able to lead by understanding the past, managing the present, and always looking to the future. This person must be supportive and protective of their staff. This person must be the best candidate. In my assessment, encompassing the interview process, feedback from the multiple panels and residents, along with my personal review, my choice is Katherine Caffrey. Matt Mahoney, Councilmember, Des Moines, Washington. Now, this statement, it was read just to reflect his thoughts and his involvement in the process, but his vote won't count tonight because he's not here. So we will have 6 votes tonight. I wanted to make my own personal comment. This was the most comprehensive selection process that most participants had heard of, including HR professionals. So the way we engaged the staff, the community, ourselves, it was a very comprehensive process for both the interviewers and the candidates. But it was a great opportunity for public input, more than most people had ever seen. Right now, I'm doing a listening tour through town, doing some one-on-ones and group meetings, and I've had an opportunity last week to talk to dozens of people and checked in with every member of the staff panel, every member of the community panel, several members of the Citizens Advisory Panel, and spent the day down at the market. Save 2 individuals, all of those people, there was a 100% consensus pretty much across the board on who everybody would pick as their #1 choice. Incredibly, wouldn't say it was not collaborative, but just this cohesive thought about everybody's impression about who they wanted to lead the city in this way administratively. So with that in mind, and that's my opinion as well. So my favorite was Katherine as well. So without further ado, I would like to ask for a motion. Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Yes. Yep, hang on. There it is. I move to select Katherine Caffrey for the city manager position and authorize the staff to prepare a conditional offer of employment.
Second, Councilmember Nutting.
Second.
Okay. So any discussion before we move to a vote? Councilmember Harris.
Thank you. I will not put forward a second nomination, but I want to acknowledge the value of Shannon Kelly Fawn. I noticed in a couple of the comments, people said, well, with a little more seasoning and so on. I've worked with like hundreds of Fortune 500 companies, and she's ready to go right now. And whoever gets her would be lucky, and I thank her for her applying and for providing some very good insight to this process. That's it.
Councilmember Oxiger.
Yeah, yes, I would like to say that, you know, I'm fully in support of this motion, and just as a note of, I don't want to say caution, but we have a lot of issues that we have to deal with, and plopping Katherine in the middle of this situation means that she's, you know, going to have quite a challenge. And I hope that we would all have the grace to do whatever we can to help her be successful and in turn us be successful. So I think it's a good decision, and I hope we can all find the ability to support it. Thank you.
Let's opportunity for everybody else to have their first take. Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Grace Matsui.
I would echo most everything that has been said here, so I won't go on and say the exact same things. I also wanted to add my thanks to all the community members who participated by showing up to one of those sessions or by watching the presentations online and submitting comments online. Thank you very much for your interest and your clear participation and support of this very important decision. I also want to echo and say thanks to the staff and to our consultant, David Twan. I think that this process may have come across or may have felt laborious, but that's because we conducted it here with a full council as a hiring panel rather than delegating that to a group of 3 on our council. So you saw all the deliberation, all of the items to the minutia that went on the job description, because we wanted you to see what was important to us and what we were looking for and how that would drive applicants to go ahead and consider our city as their next stop. And so it may have felt like many, 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 many months and perhaps almost a year, and it was, but that's because you saw all of it play out live. And I think that is a commitment to you and also a showing of the amount of transparency that we want to give and model for our community. This has not been the process that we have seen in past selection processes. I'm very confident in Catherine's experience and the kind of strengths that she brings to the city, and I'm very excited that we have the opportunity to invite her to join us.
Absolutely. Councilmember Harris, do you still want to make a comment? All right, go ahead.
Colleagues, there will be a certain lead time after this selection, even if everything goes fully to plan. And the best thing we can do for her going forward is to work together collaboratively so that, man, I'm having an English-speaking thing tonight. The budget thing is no joke, and we can do a lot better in terms of compromising and coming to some sort of consensus. The various applicants and the public talked about the lack of strategic plan. We have the time to develop that before this person shows up, and in my opinion, that would be the single best gift we could give to her so that when she shows up, she has a clear direction. I can't think of anything worse than showing up and not feeling like there is a mission statement to go. So that's what I'm hoping we can do in the intervening weeks. Thank you.
All right. I would like to offer, it's been said before, an additional thanks. I'm relatively sure that the candidates are watching this meeting tonight. So thank you for your willingness to go through this with us. We have appreciated each one of you. Some of these people, all four of them, really have done fantastic work wherever they have been. And in their own right, several characteristics of each of them were incredibly impressive. Leaving either behind a great name or a great resume or great work, things that will stand in their communities as a legacy to them. So that's why each of them were elevated to as our 4 finalists, because of those characteristics. So thank you for willing to go through this. And I do want to say that the reason that they were is not the criticisms that they hold for our community, but the amazing qualities that they saw, especially when they came here. All of them are in love with this community. So I appreciate their strategic thinking ability and what they're going to bring to the table, but any of them would have been excited to come here. And I am, but particularly excited to work with Katherine if she turns out to be the choice in a few moments. So looking forward to our future. We've got a lot to bring to the table, and our leadership has a lot to bring to the table. Really looking forward to a great future. We're going to get through this budget process. That's not even a question. It's going to be good. Okay, ready. I'm going to call a vote. All in favor of this motion, please raise your right hand. 6-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, next up is going to be the budget presentation. We're going to discuss strategies and have a kind of a dual presentation here with City Manager Tim George and Finance Director Jeff Friend. So I'm going to hand the baton to you two.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Good evening, public. Jeff Friend, Finance Director. I don't know if Tim is going to open. Okay. So before we start, I think one of the things, I want to address a couple of things, and one of them is related to the commentary earlier where it appears there's a communication issue. There's a misconception, and so I just want to take a moment and explain the presentation tonight, and when we talk about a budget deficit, we're talking about the general fund. And the city, any city has different types of funds. So when you see, marina steps or road work, those are capital projects that are funded with capital money, and that's in separate funds than the general fund. So you don't have to be concerned that your police funding or your funding for parks is in competition with a capital project or road work or anything like that, because those have separate funding and are on the books separately from the day-to-day operations in the general fund. But I do appreciate the feedback, because one of the reasons we have the budget strategies in the packet and here is because we're seeking guidance. So we're listening to what the public has to say. We're listening to what council is going to want, because they should be following what you guys have prioritized. And so that's really, when we say that this is a budget draft, we haven't implemented anything, what that means is we've gathered the requests from departments. And really that's it. We haven't made decisions on, we're going to cut this, we're going to cut that. We've gathered the information, and now we're listening. But we also need the community to listen when we need to correct a misconception. So if we listen to each other and we have that open communication, I think that would bode well for this budget process throughout the year. So I just wanted to address that and make those comments before we get into the actual presentation, which I accidentally went ahead of slide. So this presentation, we're going to talk first about the economic environment. We're going to look at the financial forecast, and then we'll address the budget strategies, which are listed in the packet, I think, which many people have read. That'll be a more interactive section where we're going to bring up a strategy, and we want feedback from council on those items. So to start, beginning with the economic environment. And where we start that discussion, of course, would be inflation. So what this chart shows is inflation over the last decade. And this is the June Consumer Price Index for urban consumers for the Seattle area. And the reason that we use that is because the annual cost of living adjustments that are done by the city when they're applied to salaries and benefits, that's the index that we use. And so if you look at 2015 through 2020, you know, those are the pre-pandemic days, of course. And so it tends to hover around 2%, sometimes a little less, sometimes a bit more, and then drops down to about 0.9% inflation in 2020. And then through COVID, of course, the federal government pumped money into the economy. And then in June of 2022, we had an inflation of about 10.1%. So that's quite a drastic increase from 2020 to 2022. And then it calms down a little bit. In June of 2024, it is 3.8%. So according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation calculator, what cost $1 in June of 2020 costs $1.22 in June of 2024. So what is the effect of that? So around the region, if you look at the city of Seattle, it says City Council gets its audit showing inflation wages at center of Seattle's ballooning budget. A review of the city's spending plan by the City Council reveals Seattle City Hall is facing the same pressures as the rest of the nation when it comes to ballooning costs. A new study reveals nearly 80% of Seattle's $1.7 billion budget increase is due to inflation and soaring wages. And then the review comes as Seattle faces a looming $230+ million budget hole. If we look at counties, King County, this is from the Seattle Times, the legislature passes bills that may help King County's budget crisis. Last fall, King County Executive Dow Constantine issued dire warnings about the county's budget situation. Without help from the legislature, it would be forced to shutter all or almost all of its 10 public health clinics. The county's general fund is fueled almost entirely by property taxes, and Olympia strictly limits how much counties can collect in those taxes. With inflation running hot the last several years, Constantine said the county's expenses were outpacing the money it was able to bring in. Now, on a smaller city level, if you look at the city of Edmonds, which coincidentally was, I think in our communication study, our comparable city that the consultant used, Edmonds mayor makes first pitch of plan to fill $20.5 million budget deficit. The city used $12.5 million in one-time funds and $8 million from reserves to balance its 2024 budget with a deficit looming. Harold Nett says inflation spiked the city's costs by 21.7% over the past 3 years, but state law only allows cities to increase taxes by a maximum of 1% annually. So if you remember the 22 cents, increase from 2020 to 2024, that's really in alignment with this 21.7% increase. And the mayor of Edmonds, Mike Rosen, says that's pretty much a recipe for a slow death if your costs are going up by that kind of pace and you can't increase your revenue by anywhere near that. I also wanted to comment, too, as you notice, it says that they drew $8 million from reserves. And speaking again about communication, I think there's a term, people use the term reserves, and we talk about fund balance, and those are different things. So cities might have a fund, and maybe it's called a contingency fund. Maybe they have reserves. They have cash that they've set aside that they've built up for, in case of emergency. So those are reserves. The city of Des Moines does not have reserves. Okay, so we talk about fund balance. Fund balance is kind of like the equity in your house. So if you have a house that the market value is $500,000 and you owe about $300,000 on it, you got $200,000 of equity. The general fund, we have assets and liabilities. It works the same way. So just because you have $200,000 equity in your house doesn't mean you have $200,000 of cash in your pocket or purse to carry around. So in the same way, the general fund, we started the year with about $4.5 million of fund balance, but we don't have $4.5 million of cash sitting in the general fund. is much less than that, which requires the staff to diligently manage the cash flow. So I just wanted to make that clarification because I get concerned if people think we have magic reserves set aside. And in relation to that, we do have a threshold for our fund balance to stay at 16.67% of operating expenditures, because the theory is if you liquidate everything in your general fund, you should have enough to pay expenses for 2 months. So that's kind of, when we reference those things, that's kind of the definition of those terms, and that's what we're talking about. So given this environment, what are cities doing? So the answer is ballot measures. So this is a collection of ballot measures that are recent. Almost all of these are from the August 6th election. Maple Valley's from last November. Gig Harbor has one from April. So the ones that passed, we've got City of Covington passed a 0.2% sales and use tax for transportation. City of Snoqualmie passed a sales and use tax for public safety, 0.1% increase. City of Maple Valley last November passed a property tax levy lid lift, which was a 45-cent increase per thousand of assessed value. City of Buckley passed a property tax levy lid lift, which was a 20-cent increase. City of Gig Harbor passed public safety sales tax for a 0.1% increase. And you see them also on the other side under failed, where they had a property tax levy lid lift fail in April. They came back in August with a sales tax. The City of Des Moines, of course, failed. It was a 50-cent increase that was on the ballot in August. And City of Everett had a property tax levy lid lift that failed in August. That was a 67-cent increase. So more specifically, how the City of Des Moines is doing, this chart shows our structural recurring revenue and expenditures. So this takes away any money that we receive that's just like for one time. This is day-to-day recurring expenses and revenue. And you can see beginning in 2019 through pretty much 2021, they're pretty much in sync. The blue line is the revenue and the red line is the expenditures. So you can see the blue line, even though it's in sync, it's still a little bit under the red. But as we hit that inflation in 2022, you can see the widening gap where the costs just rise at a pace that our revenue, which tends to remain relatively flat, can't keep up with. So as a result, on September 14th, 2023 was the budget retreat for the 2024 budget, and we presented a forecast which I think for the first time in many years actually showed a negative trend as far as how the general fund was doing, and showed that the fund balances was declining from year to year into the negative. So as a result, that was when the city really became aware that there were financial challenges up ahead. As a result, the Finance Committee was formed, began meeting in January of this year. What we do is we monitor the financial health of the general fund, and talk about different financial concerns, and we bring recommendations to the committee, one of which was the levy lid lift ballot measure. And so that's kind of the sequence of events of the city becoming cognizant of, oh, there's an issue here, and then trying to address that issue.
Jeff, if I could add one thing. So if you go back to that slide, so we adopted a budget, the council adopted a budget in November of 2023 for 2024. Shortly thereafter, we created the Finance Committee. And what we've done on the administrative side is with all of our department directors from those dates early in 2024 till now, we've been doing everything we can to keep our costs down. If we have vacant positions, we've let them roll up for a while. We've looked at contracts. We've tried to stop spending money where we can. And so far, through the first 6 months of 2024, we were able to shave off $1 million of our budget. So we did that administratively. We will continue to do that. And we continue to talk about that weekly, and we'll continue to do that through this year to do what we can to help with the budget. Unfortunately, our revenues have also been declining as well. So the conversation that we're going to be having about 2024, and we're talking about the fund balance, it's a lot rosier than it could have been if we hadn't have been working on this stuff since January. So just keep that in mind, that we've been doing a lot of work just as the staff. We've been updating the finance committee about places that we can have efficiencies. So a lot of that stuff has already been done as we're moving into next year. So just wanted to make that point.
Okay. So this section is the financial forecast. The forecast was based on these assumptions. So as I previously mentioned, this is a fully loaded draft with everybody gets what they ask for. We do the budget is functioning as if, we don't have financial issues. This is the initial state. So in a budget process, this is where you start. This is point A, and you look at it, and then if you have this situation that the city does, then we start to address that because we see we have a gap, we need to close the gap. But as far as the forecast is concerned, as I mentioned, the CPIU for Seattle in June was 3.8%. So we have a 3.8% cost of living adjustment in the forecast. The Police Support Guild members, which there are 9, they are in at 3% because they contractually get 3% next year. A 10% increase in medical premium costs. The next one is full funding for vehicle replacement, computer replacement, and vehicle maintenance. And so what the general fund does is it sets money aside in another fund for the purchase of vehicles, for the purchase of new computer equipment, and to maintain vehicles. And so, but through the pandemic, these items really were withheld and kept in the general fund just to keep the general fund solvent. But that doesn't mean those needs go away, and that's not a long-term solution. So for this forecast, we've got that in 100%. We have the transfer out of one-time sales tax and B&O tax, which is another item that seems like half the time is held in the general fund and then half the time is transferred out to a capital projects fund for capital construction. And the one-time sales tax and B&O tax, that's paid by construction companies who have a project that's permitted at $15 million or more. So that's not just the everyday taxpayer sales tax. Public safety positions funded by the American Rescue Plan Act have been removed, so that eliminates 2 police officer positions, the crime analyst and the mental health social worker position. Sales tax is assumed to grow at about 2%, and property tax revenue we have in as a 1% increase. So for 2025, the general fund forecast shows revenues at about $24.5 million. Expenditures a little over $29 million for a budget deficit of nearly $4.6 million. For 2026, pretty much the same, a little bit more revenue, $24.7 million in revenue, a little bit over 29 in expenditures for about $4.3 million budget deficit.
And Jeff, if I could just add one thing.
Yeah.
Going back to where you started, if you go back to 2025. So if we were to cancel the stairs project, that number would stay the same. Because the money for the stairs comes from a different funding source, and we're paying it back from a different funding source. Right. So we could cancel the stairs project tomorrow. We'd be out about $2 million that we've already invested, but that number is still the same. So.
Right. Yeah, the capital work is, some of it is funded by the bonds that were issued, and the bonds are not paid for by the general fund, and they're not received by the general fund. This is the forecast. So the annual budget for 2024 is in the left column. Next to it is the projected actuals for 2024, then followed by the budget as it stands at this time for 25 and 26, and then forecasted years out. So you can see the net activity under 2025, that's where the 4.5 million is before the one-time activities. One thing that should be corrected on this is that the one-time sales tax coming in and out on the bottom should have gone out through the forecasted years. But as far as reliance on one-time funds, what's notable is that the sound transit funds they're not expected to go past 2026. Those numbers are what we've received most recently from Sound Transit. And the push for 2026 is because that's when the World Cup is going to be in Seattle, so they have a push to get things done by that time. So we don't expect any sound transit funding past 2026. And also, of course, ARPA funding needs to be fully obligated in contracts by the end of this year, and it has to be spent by the end of 2026. I don't expect to have much to spend. I mean, aside from what's currently in the steps, there shouldn't be any ARPA money supporting the general fund unless there's something really creative happening. But as far as this forecast is concerned, that would wrap up this year. In a more graphic presentation of the forecast, so here the blue line is your revenues, the orange line is your expenditures, and the fund balance is the dotted green line. So you can see this starts at 2017, and one of the things I think is notable about this chart is the blue revenue line. You can see how just generally flat that is beginning in 2017 and going through it. So there might be some growth, but it's much more gradual growth than when inflation hits your expenditures and then your expenditures kind of take off. So you can see that the forecast has that budget gap. And what's concerning is, of course, the projected balances of the ending fund balance. As far as 2025 general fund revenue, this is just a pie chart that is breaking it down by type. Taxes is that large 77.8%, so that's your sales tax, your utility tax, your property tax, B&O tax. That makes a majority of the general fund's revenue. And then the 15% is just fees and charges for services. And then intergovernmental, which is grants from other agencies, licenses, and just miscellaneous make up the last little portion of the pie chart. So of that revenue, if you break down the taxes, you can see property tax is the city's largest revenue source at about $5.5 million, followed by sales tax and utility tax. And then, of course, B&O tax, franchise fees, and criminal justice sales tax are lower levels than the top three revenue sources. I think some people refer to those three as the three-legged stool of which our revenue depends. On the expenditure side, salary and benefits are 66.6% of the city's expenditures. Services is 29.1%, and then a much smaller portion is supplies and miscellaneous. So of the 66.6%, or the 2/3 of salary, broken down by department, we have, you can see one department kind of overshadows all the rest. That is police, which salary and benefits is about $9 million. Recreation, senior services, public works, municipal court, follow finance, and other departments. So when we talk about the city's salary and benefits, I mean, the police, that's a large part of that. And of course, the police are represented by the police guilds. They're a bargaining unit. Teamsters are a bargaining unit, and there's employees that are in public works that are Teamsters that also work for the Marina. Marina's not represented here, of course. And also we have the new Police Support Guild, which are the record specialists and community service officers. And like I said, there's 9 of those. Okay, budget strategies. So this is the more interactive with council section of the presentation. So this is the RCW. A balanced budget refers to the budgeting concept that appropriations should not exceed resources available to cover these expenditures. Cities and towns are required to pass a balanced budget. So when it says do not exceed resources available, so our resources are our fund balance and our revenue. And the problem with the current draft of the budget is that in 2025, the expenditures exceed, those two combined and leave the fund at a deficit. And you can see legally, we can't do that. So what can the city do this year that can help the general fund? And that's one thing we do want to get a consensus on. is our American Rescue Plan Act funds. These funds were dedicated by council to certain projects. They've been repurposed here and there. They are required, as I mentioned, to be in contract by the end of 2024. So the tenant restroom, which is the first one listed there for $400,000, we're not able to get that in to a contract. And that tenant restroom is for a marina tenant restroom. The bids came in too high, and so that fund, those funds are available. We need to get that into a contract. The next two, the ADA compliance program and traffic calming, those are had some ARPA funds dedicated to them. However, the Redondo speed enforcement revenue, which is highly restricted, can actually pay for those things. So we don't have to use ARPA funds for that. There was $100,000 for a nonprofit donations. There's $25,000 left over from that original $100,000. And then the marina redevelopment materials just hasn't been spent. That's $20,000. So those are available ARPA funds. The proposed repurposing is, first of all, the field house play equipment overruns. So if you haven't noticed by the field house, there's been play equipment projects sitting out there for several months. I'll just say our new Public Works Director has motivated the contractor to complete that because he's good at motivating you. So the overruns were expected to be about $30,000. The Des Moines Legacy Foundation was very generous and had given us a donation of $25,000 this year. So $5,000 would basically kind of ensure that we have enough money to get that project completed without too much hassle. 2024 score costs. So what happened in 2024 budget is we were hoped and had been, we believed that we could pay a lesser amount for score costs at about $750,000. That was the number that was budgeted. It turns out that that was not a good assumption. Our costs are declining in 2025, but not in 2024. So that amount of ARPA funds would help us it would fund the difference between what we budgeted and what we're being billed. 2024, the limited term crime analyst and mental health support, those funds would help fund their employment to the end of 2024. And then police department overtime. So the police department has had some openings resulting in officers working overtime. Also, it's been competitive out there, competing for officers. So we would like to fund some of the overtime that they've earned with this ARPA funds. And so that is, the lower amount, of course, equals the amount up there. So we think that's our recommended use of the available ARPA money at this time.
So if I could just add on to this a little bit. So this is strictly for 2024. We're still, when we're talking about 2025, we're still at that $4.5 million number. This would help us get towards that 16.67 ending fund balance. And so if the council would like to discuss these, or if the council would like to concur with these recommendations, we would like to leave here tonight with the ability to transfer or reassign these funds from what's listed up above to what's listed down below to help with our 2024 fund balance.
Do you want any questions right now about this slide?
Sure.
Okay, any questions about this slide? Do you want me to? Councilmember Nutting.
My comments are, I mean, absolutely understand where we're going with this and what we have to do, and it's a messy process. So, but we got to get there. So I'm fine with the recommendations.
Okay. Any other? Councilmember Harris and then Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
See that 20 grand? That was something I asked for in 2021, ARPA money to create basically a website 3D walkthrough of marina redevelopment to help in decision making. And obviously, and so my comment is that this just seems like there's like no useful discussion or decision point. All along, it's just like, hey, we got to do this. At some point, and I'm sorry how I sound, but we have to be able to have a painful discussion about how this is just this moving freight train that you can never make meaningful reforms if it's just like, oh, okay, I guess we got to do this tonight. When do you have the real planning and strategic discussion? Do you push it into next year and say, well, Catherine, you go for it? But when do you talk about actually doing something meaningful? I mean, if you say, okay, well, we'll just do this for, and we'll slog through. But I'm telling you that every council since I've been watching, and this goes back to 2008, always kicks the can down the road, because this is just what happens. And at some point, and I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Jeff. It's just at some point you got to be able to say, look, these staff recommendations. No, we got to go back to the drawing board, and other cities start having budget meetings in April. And we're at a point now, I'm like, how severe does it get before we start taking a completely different run at budgeting? And if you say, yeah, woulda, coulda, shoulda, and all that jazz, I'm like, great, but when? That's just, like, yeah, it's just ridiculous.
Okay. Did you?
Well, I would just like to add to that I think we started having budget conversations in January for this budget with the Finance Committee that you're on, Councilmember Harris. But I will say that when we're talking about having those tough discussions, so this relates to 2024. This is a strategy for 2024. We're going to have some tough discussions tonight that the council can disagree with. So I think, when are we going to have that discussion? I think we're having it right now. And we'll continue to have it as we develop the budget. But, I would love to hear from the council tonight difficult decisions, difficult challenges, ideas on how we can get through that. And I think we're going to have a wide open floor here tonight. So, and tonight is the, generally what we would call a retreat, but we're not going to call it a retreat. We're going to call it a presentation. But this is an opportunity for council. This is the beginning of the process, the full council process, but we've been meeting with the Finance Committee since January. So, we're not passing the budget tonight. We're not even putting together a draft. We have many meetings, and I'll tell you, this is what the staff has been meeting about almost daily, and I think this will be dominating what the city council is meeting about as we move forward in the coming weeks. So, thank you.
And I think I would add that as far as the nature of those discussions, because I hear what you're saying, because there is a history of relying on one-time funds, and we saw Edmonds relying on one-time funds. And I was in, for the 2024 budget was the first time I've led a budget, process. And I'd say what strikes me this year is the understanding that, as I said, that even if you don't provide the funding, the need is still there. So it's been, I think everyone's been cognizant of the fact of what is a long-term strategy and what is not a long-term strategy. Even if we're forced to say, like, well, we have ARPA money here and we can do this with it. I mean, if council doesn't want to, then council doesn't want to. But I think that I'm encouraged because of just understanding, like with vehicle replacement, which we'll get to, is we can't go another year not funding that. So I think that there's an understanding of a balance between needs, between funding, but also looking at long-term. But then again, as we've said, the candidates for the city manager have all said the same thing about the lack of the strategic plan. So, we're trying to follow, council input as best as we can, which is why we're presenting in front of the public the strategies for the budget so that we can get some kind of direction that is productive. So that's my personal feelings on the matter. So that's
Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Yeah, I think we're kind of mixing things up here a little bit. As I understand this slide, it's only about the ARPA funds, which are use it or lose it at this point. And so this is just a proposal to help us through the end of 2024 to use those funds since we have them available to us.
And that's exactly what this proposal is. Is that correct?
Yes, so what I would, yeah.
Okay, and then, yeah, and this is not part of a strategic planning process. This is, we got this money, let's use it in a functional way that actually helps our city get through the end of this year, and now we have to start addressing the strategic planning piece of it. That actually has supposed to have been going on since forming the Finance Committee last January and appointing several members of this council to that to come up with these strategies that we were looking for. So let's not get things mixed up in what they are. This is just one proposal. The question that I have about that are the score costs in particular. Do we know why those have increased more than we had budgeted for? And is this going to cover the gap that exists? And that's my biggest concern there, is because score can be a little surprising sometimes in how much it ends up costing.
Yeah, I can address that. So scores had the same issues that we've heard about, you know, that Jeff read about in the articles, right? Their costs have gone up. During the pandemic, arrests went down. And so we pay a share of the total pie, and we're one of the smaller cities. But as the big cities, as their numbers went down, even if our numbers went down, our piece of the pie kind of got larger because of their numbers. You know, if they went from 100 to 50 and we went from 8 to 7, right, our share ends up getting a little bit bigger. So as the costs are going up, our share is getting slightly larger, even if we're using it the same. And so our expectation of the cost, you know, we had budgeted a lower number and the cost came in higher. So we've been there's been a couple aspects at play this year. We've been looking at managing our prosecution and some of that stuff where we can get a little bit more creative, and we're managing our jail usage. So that's been helpful. The other piece is, as we're pulling out of the pandemic, the bigger cities are arresting more and they're using score more. So their numbers are going up, which shrinks our piece of the pie, even if our numbers were the same. So that's where we're at. So our projection for 2025 and beyond is less, but we were, for this year, 2024, we paid over $1 million in jail costs. And that's a substantial amount of money.
And that amount on the screen does close the gap between what we budgeted and what we're being billed.
All right. Thank you. I mean, this is a very reasonable way to spend this use it or lose it money that has nothing to do with any strategic planning or anything like that, but rather just trying to make sure that a resource that we do have available actually gets spent on the city to help us with the finish of this budget year.
That's
Is that correct? All right. Thank you. I'm supportive of this proposal.
Any other questions? I have a few. Did you have a?
No, go.
Well, I thought I heard you say something. All right. Okay, so if the 614 is not covered, that means we don't have 16.67 reserve, right? It reduces that reserve.
No, so.
In other words, when we finish out 2024, if we don't put 614 of ARPA funds to cover these, is that going to affect the 16.67?
Yes, that would negatively affect it.
Okay, so if we don't reach the 16.67 in 2024, what's the outfall of that?
I'm sorry, what's the?
If we finish 2024 and we don't, and we're not at 16.67, okay, what's the outfall of that? What's the backlash? What happens negatively to us because of that?
You would be violating, or you would not be complying with the council's policies on, I'm not going to call them reserves, I'm going to call them fund balance. Yes.
Okay, oh, so we're not calling it a reserve anymore. Right now, we're calling it a 16.7. So we are violating our own code that says that we are going to do that. What else? Does it negatively affect our rating? Do we get a finding?
You could risk a finding, and also, I mean, I don't foresee us going out for bonds, but it could be a granting agency might say, oh, you have this policy to maintain what's pretty common threshold.
Okay,
And if we're not maintaining that, then that maybe could hurt our funding opportunities.
okay.
But, I mean, it's in the, as Tim said, it's in the city's code, it's our own policy.
But when you don't meet it, at the end of the year and you decide, you make decisions that end up where you don't meet that 16.67, then you must do something like come before the council and, what is it called, waive a code or, you know, override the code that you got in order to pass the budget? Is that what you're saying? You have to, somehow you have to deal with that segment of code when.
I would expect there would need to be a resolution or something.
Okay.
That's more of a, I think Tim might have a better answer on that, but, yeah, if you fail to meet the policy that you've set and the threshold that has been set, then I would think that it would need to be waived.
Okay. The thing that concerns me about this is it's other than the playhouse, the equipment overruns, $5,000, none of it is capital. And, you know, one-time money, the other thing that we're not complying with is our resolution or our code or whatever our decision to not use one-time money for operations. And we did use a lot of the ARPA funding for, you know, things like that. It would be nice to see some options up there that allow us to spend it on revenue-producing capital. I love revenue-producing capital. Maybe that's unreasonable, but I don't see that. I don't know if there's been discussions about, are there capital options for that funding? And if it does mean that we dip under without a bond rating reduction is of no consequence at this time, and it simply means that we haven't stayed with our principles, I would just like the discussion, is there a way to take $614,000 and put it into something that increases or gives us sustainable revenue somewhere? Like, gosh, I don't even know if you could fix up a building or a portion of a building, or that you could lease or rent. I'm not sure, but we haven't had that conversation. Like, is there a way to use $600,000 to produce revenue instead of just fill gaps that's sustainable?
I'm not sure if there would be a timeline to get that done by the end of the year. The capital improvement plan is scheduled to come to council at the end of September. It doesn't have to.
So it has
but I'm not sure which project that would be that would generate revenue that would benefit the general fund.
Okay.
Well, and I think, and maybe that's part of your long-term plan that you're talking about, is that, you know, how can we prioritize budgeting to support capital projects that create revenue?
Mm-hmm.
But really, this is kind of a short-term filling a gap, spending money that needs to be spent by the end of the year, and helping us get as close as possible to that 16.67% ending fund balance, so that we can stay in alignment with the council's policy, which is also at 16.67. It's a financial standard of 2 months of operating revenue. So it's a council policy, but it's a really good policy to have, because if something were to happen, you want to have at least, you know, some money to be able to cover your costs during a period of time where you wouldn't run out of money.
And you're saying this has to be spent by the end of this year or the end of next year?
It has to be
It has to be allocated.
Yes.
So I don't know, maybe even that is too short of a time to pick some capital project that you can finish spending the money in a year. Anyway, it would be that I'm introducing the subject. Don't know if there's conversation. It is an easy fix, 614, 613, 614, 613, and then it's done. Why tonight? Why tonight? Why do you want it tonight?
So when we were talking about, you know, reserves and fund balance, and I mentioned cash management.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you recall, a couple of presentations ago, I think it was the first quarter, second quarter report. And there was a schedule of the cash in each fund. And there was $75 million. And I pointed out that, yes, there's $75 million throughout all the funds in the city. However, in the general fund, the only portion of all that, so of all that $75 million, there's $1 million of unrestricted cash. That's all the unrestricted cash that the city has, and it's $1 million. So, and part of our cash management the last few weeks, to be completely clear about this, has been checking the cash balance of the general fund on a daily basis. And the reason we have to do that is because, as I said, there was $1 million. Today, there's about $380,000. And to put that into perspective, when we run one payroll, that's about $700,000. So when we have a position that, like the mental health support, that is supposed to be funded by ARPA, and that, you know, if we can get that to the end of the year, as they're expecting to be paid through the end of the year, then we'll have cash in the general fund, and we'll be able to make payroll and have those funded positions. And so if there's urgency to that, part of that is cash management. Because even right now, when we have check runs, I'm looking at the check run, we're looking at, okay, what's coming out of the general fund? Can we afford to pay them? So, or do we, because if that cash drops from 380,000 to below zero, by code, we cannot pay our invoices. So, I mean, I don't want to be alarmist, because I mean, it sounds really serious about making payroll, about paying your bills, but that's the reality of the general fund and the cash balance, because our main revenue is property tax. And so I liken it to living paycheck to paycheck. We get most of that property tax in April. So we're okay in April, and we can manage our cash, and we can get through the summer. But now we're getting close to October, so it's like when you run out of money, getting close to payday. So, you know, I look at, we have a payroll coming up next. How will that be funded? So the council doesn't need to make a decision on this based on like immediate cash needs. We need cash now. But if I'm asked, why do I want that tonight? Why would that be helpful in September? Is because that'll help us get to October. I mean, that's just an honest answer. So that's the cash management. That's why I say we don't have reserves of $4.5 million in the general fund. We have a cash balance. That can be, at times, after property tax comes in, it can be up to $3.5 million. But when we get quite a ways past property tax, that starts to shrink. So, so that's my answer why tonight. That would be my response as the finance director, as far as managing the cash, making sure we can get through smoothly. And then the positions that are funded through the end of the year.
So 1 more week is okay?
We could wait a week.
I'm not going to be that person that breaks the back of the majority here, so I appreciate the opportunity to ask the questions. Councilmember Harris.
Like other people, I'd love other people to weigh in. But I keep going back to 2008. You know, I bought my first house at an 18.5% mortgage back in 1704. And I mention that because I've been watching this long enough that I knew this was coming in 2019, not because, you know, I'm Jack Welch, management genius. It's just that we go through these cycles. You can call it COVID, you can call it inflation. I mean, you can check out right now if you want, but we go through these cycles here. The first finance director I saw, you were referred to them as black swan events. And she said we should start planning like they're gonna happen. We may not know what the cause is, but they're gonna happen. And I'm sick of this. I'm just sick of it, and so I feel, I'm just speaking for myself, the Finance Committee has been, by definition, a total failure, because if it was successful, that decision point would have happened at one of our meetings, and we would simply bring this to the council with some kind of with that short term. The fact that the 7 of us are monkeying with this means that the Finance Committee has not actually accomplished a darn thing. And I'm sorry if I sound like I'm ranting here and everything, but at some point when, you know, yeah, I'll give you one thing. City manager, you made the marina steps an all or nothing deal. I tried to say during the bonds and at every vote, there have been 6 decision points. And I'm like, can we just make it a little bit a la carte? Like maybe we can have some steppy things and then maybe not the loggy thing and, you know, just break it into pieces. Okay, no, I'm not done here, okay, because it was supposed to be, but basically, we never break it down.
This is not supposed to be a rain.
No, that's a very thing. How can we pull back 1 million from that?
Time out, let's not have a conversation at the dais. Gentlemen, all of us, please, no, wait a minute.
This is the war room.
No, Councilmember Harris, this is a study.
How can we break apart some of these things? The staff has put forward this, and this is like the only decision thing. Why can't Peter Phillips be on the table? Why can't some money be put aside for some kind of other approach to other things? Okay, in other words, we're voting on the only, it's like I would say to Vic, you know, it's like you go into the store and there are 3 drills. Okay, that doesn't mean there are only 3 drills available to buy. It just means those are the only 3 drills that Home Depot stocks. And so I agree with not making this decision tonight, you know, but I'm not sure there is a collective will to do anything by waiting a week. But if you really, I mean, yeah, definitely wait. This is just like sort of a, you know, snap decision that should have been made over a period of months. But, you know, I'm just curious as to what a week would buy us. Okay, I'm done.
All right. So, Deputy Mayor Stevens, I am going to ask that you make statements directly to the air, you know, or questions, right? That this doesn't interact with, like this doesn't become a back and forth. But I do also want to defer to the city manager for just a moment.
Yeah, I think that was a question about making decisions tonight. We have a whole, like, we're only a third of the way through the PowerPoint, and we need a lot of input from the council. So this isn't the only issue that the council's going to be asked questions about. We don't need decisions on everything. This one specifically relates to 2024, and, you know, a decision that needs to be made sooner rather than later. We do have a bunch more slides about future decisions. I will say, I don't want to completely discredit the Finance Committee. I think they've done a lot of work this year. We've ran a number of scenarios by them that we have implemented, and we have a number in this presentation moving forward. And I also want to point out that the Finance Committee did come forward with a plan that would have raised $3 to $3.5 million specifically devoted to public safety. Okay, and so that we'd be having a much different, much shorter conversation tonight if that plan had been fully executed to the end. It didn't get the support it needed, and so we're having this conversation. But the Finance Committee did come forward with a plan to essentially eliminate this discussion about public safety and where those cuts need to be made. So I don't want to discredit the work that they've done, because I think they did a lot of work, and I think they came forward with a plan. Ultimately, it was not successful, but it was a plan. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
I have two specific questions. As far as the ARPA, transfer the ARPA funds or repurposing of the $5,000 of the field house plate equipment that is an overrun. Have we asked Legacy for more? Could we free up some of those funds just simply by asking if Legacy would be willing to help cover all of the overruns?
No, we have not made that request of Legacy.
That would be worth.
We have another request pending with them, so.
And then secondly, is back to the salary and benefits by the department. What percentage, or we might calculate it, is controlled by represented units, in other words, bargaining
say we can move somebody's salary around a bit more than what we have negotiated with you.
So the police department itself is about 55%. They're not all police guild, but pretty much a vast majority of them are represented. I think we have about, and I'm sure AJ can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's about, is it probably 30 to 40 Teamsters? Is that?
Yeah, a little under 30.
Yeah, a little under 30 for Teamsters. So you could reasonably, I think, say 50%, a little bit more, are represented employees in the general fund.
Councilmember Nutting.
Thank you, Mayor. Pardon me. My question is there was a statement earlier, I just want clarification on, are the bonds supported by the general fund?
No.
And since they're not supported by the general fund, that wouldn't change anything that we're talking about the budget right now?
That's correct.
Thank you.
So I guess just to get through this, if the council would like us to bring this back next week, we can. If the council would like to say, give us concurrence tonight that this is okay, we can do that too. So we're open to either. Just let us know, and because we do have a lot, quite a few more slides.
Councilmember Nutting.
I agree with what's up there, but if it's the consensus of the whole, I don't mind taking it up again next week.
Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, I want to keep that 20,000 because I think $20,000 of software somewhere can buy us a ton of efficiencies. It may, the boat on the marina redevelopment may have sailed, but ARPA was meant for strategic work for the future, and we basically just dropped most of it into plugging holes. And I can do a lot with 20,000 in software in improving public engagement, collecting various fees, improving any number of city processes. I don't know what they are right now, but I'm pretty sure you can find them somewhere. So we should spend at least some money strategically, and that's just at least that much. But whatever the majority wants to do.
Okay, Councilmember Oxgar, your turn.
Okay, I think there's some discussion that still needs to go on this, and so I would move that we postpone this decision until the next meeting.
Do we need a motion, or do we need 3 people on this?
We can just move on. If you don't take action tonight, we'll bring it back next week.
Okay, let's touch it again next week. Thank you, Jeff. Let's go to the next one.
Hey, on the revenue side for 25-26, business licenses, we're proposing an increase to business license fees for in-city and out-of-city commercial business licenses. That actually will be on the agenda next week, so we have a draft ordinance for that. Those licenses represent about 86% of the business licenses that are paid for by the, issued by the city. So that's why we're limiting it to those 2 licenses. So I don't know if there's anything to discuss there. We're going to be bringing that back next week.
I will just note, we'll be bringing forward a resolution next week. This was vetted with the Finance Committee and was recommended by the Finance Committee to bring forward. So that's another piece that they contributed to this. So we'll be bringing that forward at September 12th meeting.
Yeah, so the expected increase in revenue would be about $112,000. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Councilmember Grace Matsui.
I think I know the answer, but I wanted to make sure, this is about increase the schedule that we already have for business license, but it doesn't include any new potential revenue from short-term rentals that we had talked about earlier this year?
That's correct. This is just specifically for in-city, out-of-city commercial licenses.
Gotcha. And is that a discussion that will circle back around? I haven't been able to follow it through, whether it's completed its journey through the Finance Committee.
For short-term rentals, yeah, we're working on the ordinance now and hope to have it forward to the council shortly.
Great. So that could also be potentially included in the revenue, possibly.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Did I see another hand a moment ago? Just, okay. All right.
Public records request fee increase. We expect about 20,000 if we were to implement an increase to the fees for public records. Only Bonnie, if you want.
I can just add to that. So we haven't updated our fee schedule in a long time. The majority of the records that we provide for no cost, with no cost. And we have 3 to 4 staff members who consistently work on records requests. We have several requesters that do kind of large-scale, continuous requests that we don't charge money for when we can. So we're in the process of putting together a fee schedule update, which would take into account the actual time costs. And we're limited on what we can charge, right? It's the, you know, Washington Public Records, you know, we should be providing things, but when it, you know, when we're hiring multiple people to provide records, you know, excessive amounts, you know, there is an amount that we can charge under state law. So we're looking at updating our code and our fee schedule. We believe if we do that, we could recover about $20,000 above what we currently recover, which is next to nothing.
Utility tax on non-franchise prohibited utilities, an increase of a little over 88,000. Did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, so this is kind of a unique situation. So in the 2014, 2015, when the city negotiated franchise agreements, there was a question about whether or not cities could impose a utility tax on local utilities. That question has since been answered that yes, we can, but at the time, we negotiated franchise agreements with all of our franchises except for one, and those included a franchise payment in lieu of, so the city essentially waived our ability to impose a utility tax. So all of the utilities in the city, the water, sewer, pay a 6% franchise payment. We did not include that with Water District 54. So currently they are a utility that does not pay a utility tax or a franchise payment. So our recommendation would be to make them comparable to the other utilities and impose a 6% utility tax on utilities that do not pay a franchise payment or that are not currently prohibited from a utility tax in their agreements. So, and that if they were to pay 6% as the other utilities do, that would be roughly $88,000 a year. So that would be something that would require an ordinance, and we'd have to bring that forward and we'd have to do certain things, but that would essentially bring them into parity with what other utilities pay.
I just wanted to clarify, I'm sorry.
Oh, Councilmember Grace Matsui.
I believe Water District 54 pays a blanket, like a flat rate franchise fee. It's just not a 6%. It's annual flat.
Yeah, they pay a $5,000 year franchise fee.
Right.
But they do not have any language in their franchise agreement that prohibits the city from imposing a utility tax.
Correct.
Every other utility in the city has that language.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Right, but it doesn't, I wanted to clarify, because
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that there is recognition that there is a franchise agreement with Water District 54, and it just has a flat rate rather than a percentage rate. So they do, in fact, pay a franchise fee.
An administrative fee, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something that we can discuss further with the Finance Committee, but this would be a recommendation to provide parity among utility payers and to raise some revenue where there currently is no revenue.
Okay.
Next slide, on the expenditure side, the first one is to terminate the Wesley Senior Services contract, reorganize recreation, senior services, and events and facility rentals, consolidating them, which could yield estimated $150,000. And Bonnie, did you want to address this at all? Or, I have directors here that are lifelines for.
Well, and I think that might be for questions. I think, so if I want to address the transition piece. So obviously, when we're looking at how do we balance a budget, we're looking at increasing revenues where we can. And so we've, put our collective heads together as directors, and we came up with the last slide, right? There are not a lot of ways for us to raise revenue absent. We had this public safety lid lift. We're looking at business licenses. We're looking at, the fees that go into the general fund, and there aren't very many. And so that's what we came up with, right? Not a lot of money there, absent the lid lift. So now we're rolling over to expenditures. So where can we make cuts? Where can we create efficiencies? Where we lower what else we pay? And so this is another item that we introduced to the Finance Committee that we vetted with them. And if there's questions about it, we can certainly answer them. But with this strategy, we would move our event staff up to the senior center. This would allow us to actually provide more staff at the senior center. We believe doing this, we could increase the hours that it's available. We could offer more programs. In turn, we could create more revenue. And we do this by moving existing staff and kind of essentially combining duties. And so we terminate the contract with Wesley. They are aware that we're considering it. They're aware that it's not due to any performance issues that they've had. It's strictly a dollar and cents idea, and that's the world we live in right now. So if there are questions about it, we're certainly happy to answer them.
And could you complete also, what's the effect on the current staff? The Wesley staff, would that staff be retained with this transition?
Well, so Wesley would do whatever they do with their staff. I mean, they would remove their staff from the building.
Okay.
And we would put staff into the building.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Harris.
Yeah, I'm trying so hard not to vibrate. It would have been more helpful to me. I mean, we did talk about this in the Finance Committee, and it would have been more helpful to me anyway to have the benefit statements on this slide that the Finance Committee saw. You made you made some good points. It's just I know it's going to be of concern to people, and we were lucky enough to get a little bit of background, but this is the kind of decision that I wish were fleshed out so that both the public and we understand what that, we're saving $150,000, but okay, what are the actual impacts, plus and minus? I'm just saying there should have been more information here, and that's all.
Do you feel like the city manager answered a lot of those questions, though, verbally?
Fine.
All right. Any other questions there? Good, thank you, Jeff.
Well, I guess.
Oh, go ahead.
I guess this could be another item that we bring back, or if the council is okay with this, we'd like to notify Wesley of our intent to terminate. It's a 90-day notice, so if we were to do this around now, it would be effective at the beginning of the year.
All right, would you like a vote? I mean, or do we have a head nod? Is there any concerns? Looks like head nod, head nod, head nod. He said no, so I think we're good on that. Thank you.
So next item would be close the Redondo substation, which would save $36,400 in leasing costs.
Councilmember Harris.
So I tried for, what was the benefit statement of or what is the loss in service to the community? I could never get a read on what the value proposition was. So, so maybe it's, an easy thing to drop. I'm just want to make sure it isn't something that's actually, of importance to the new chief. Thank you.
Well, it is of importance. It's not ideal. So what happens when you have a substation, the reason that substation exists is to get more resources serving that part of the city. If you don't have a substation there, what you're going to find is officers come back to write their police reports here. They come to turn in evidence here. They come to have lunch here. You're going to have a reduced level of service in the Redondo community. So that will directly result in reduced services in the north end of our city. Or, correction, south end of our city. I apologize.
Deputy Mayor Steinmetz and then Councilmember Nutting.
Yeah, just a couple of questions about that. I'm assuming the lease is up at the end of the year. Is that, I mean, are we breaking the lease to do this, or?
The lease ends in March.
Okay.
So we would just not renew it.
All right. And then there are a number of other agencies that share that facility, the substation there, to do work in DEA, FBI, a couple of other task forces. Are they in a position to keep it open? Have we had discussions with them about picking up that rent?
It's my understanding that it's not as widely used by other agencies as it used to be. It's generally just Des Moines law enforcement, code enforcement that are there.
All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Nutting.
My challenge with this is that I have recently did a ride-along, and seeing that we have spent quite a bit of money upgrading that substation from what it was to what it is now. And it does, for the way the teams are broken up in the city and the service in the area, it affords the two officers that would be, the two patrol officers that would be down in that area, a place to break, and a place to do, as Chief Boe said, do their reports, and a place to have their lunch if they're not, on a call or whatnot. And the amount of money we just spent upgrading that station within the last couple months. So my challenge is it is $36,000, but it affords the south end of our town a quicker response time for any issues that are going on between, what is it, I don't know, 220 something to 272nd, or 200 to whatever. It just allows a quicker response time. So I really have a challenge of this because it has been beneficial in the past.
Yeah.
And is more beneficial now than it has been in the last 3 or 4 years.
And I would say I agree with you, and I think the chief agrees with you as well. And obviously these are challenging times. And what I would say is that we would rather have officers than a substation. And so, we're going to have a number of challenging items, and we can always reprioritize, right? And so these are initial expenditure cuts that save us our personnel, right? And so that's what we're going to keep talking about and keep presenting, and certainly, ultimately it'll be the council's decision, but we would like to provide you opportunities where, costs can be cut that don't result in service level decreases, which, we'll get there too. But that's where we're coming from.
Absolutely. And I appreciate your response, City Manager, and I agree with you wholeheartedly that keeping personnel over a substation is important, but if there's other cuts that we can make, I'd be open to that. Thank you.
So any other questions on this really quick? So, for example, on this one, then could we just get a second touch on that? Maybe when we come back, say, well, these are the cuts that we got all of our head nods on. Here's consideration. So it sounds like.
Yeah. So this one specifically, our lease doesn't expire till March of 2025. Okay. So we would essentially be plugging into the budget January and February lease payments, unless we found another funding source for the rest of that, and then we could plug the whole year in. So we don't need to give notice. We don't need to do anything at this moment.
All right.
So the council doesn't need to decide on this, just letting you know that this is an idea of a way to save $36,000 a year moving forward.
Okay. Thank you.
And then the next item would be to eliminate human services spending of $250,000.
Do you want questions on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just assuming we'll have input.
Okay. Councilmember Oxiger.
Part of being a city, part of being a community is we protect the most vulnerable, and we address the issues of the most vulnerable of our citizens. And $250,000 out of our budget is, not that great. It's what, one half of 1% or whatever it is that we have.
It's 1% of our general fund.
1%, okay. I think this is one of the last areas that we want to cut. I will say this, if the committee is, I'm the liaison to the committee, one of the things the committee is doing is looking for the possibility of a capacity building grant to make sure that we are, we're not double funding areas that we don't have to, that we aren't providing funds for some of these nonprofit groups that are duplicating what other things are going on. So I think the Human Services Committee is, very conscious of making sure that, the greatest needs are being covered. And this one sends shivers up my spine, the thought of eliminating that, because these people do, these nonprofit groups do provide incredible service to those that are most in need of our citizens. So I'm a firm no on this one.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Councilmember Oxinger just said. It's tough to do that, but in terms of prioritization, this would be near the bottom of the list of where I would look to save money, because it's not a significant amount. It does significantly help people who need the help, and it's something that our city can do to help those citizens, as we heard before. So I'm just saying, as a priority, that's not a priority that I would want to look at initially, and certainly not until we're really getting down to the brass tacks.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councilmember Grace Matsui.
I would also support retaining the human services spending in our 2025-2026 budget. I'm a little unfamiliar with some of this process of how we reach these decisions, and I know we don't have time to go into the benefit or backstory of each one of them, but I am curious about, have there's been consideration for 5%, 7% decrease across every budget rather than looking at individual line items?
Well, certainly. I mean, I think even when we get through this, right, we're still going to leave a question to the council, right, of where's the rest, right? And so an answer to that certainly could be 5%, 10%. I mean, when you're talking about $4.5 million of a $30 million budget, that's more than 10%, right? So yes, we could task that with each department. We wanted to create options, things to consider. Certainly I agree with everything that's been said about human services funding. I'm very involved with the contracting piece. As a prosecutor, I was involved with, some of the services that the agencies provide for us. Not somewhere you want to cut, but, these are the conversations that we're having about where do you find $4.5 million, right? This is, sometimes you look at, kind of what is a luxury? What are things that we would like to keep our level of police services. We would like to keep our level of park services, events, senior services. So where else do we look, right? And so these are all kind of ideas that the directors came up with as options. So nothing up here is set in stone, all ideas, all talking points for discussion. We have several months to work through this, and that's what tonight is, the discussion, the starting point of some difficult conversations. So I appreciate all the comments, and we'll keep moving forward.
Okay, Councilmember Harris, and then Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
I've lived here long enough to recall when the council's aspirations for human service spending was 2%. And I'm thinking of, the book 1984, where the chalk ration keeps getting sort of dialed back until 1% becomes the aspiration. The thing I've always struggled with in human services in my tenure, going back to the 90s, it was a much more transparent process. I have confidence in the advisory committee members, but rather than set a number, it would be nice to have some kind of, for me, it would be nice to have some kind of transparency as to the proposals, which we used to have in the 90s. It would be like every quarter there would be a vague idea of what the committee was proposing, because not all, it might be that if we could not afford the entire amount, maybe there are some priorities that, the council is more interested in than others, as painful as that discussion might be. But just picking a number, and I'm speaking broadly, in every department, I don't think is a very productive discussion. Just saying, 250 or 220, it's just a number and an abstraction, and anything that, brings that number into specific benefits to the community, that's something I'd be more interested in. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Yeah, can we take a break?
We've
been going about 2 hours.
Let's finish then this one element. And what do you have for bullets left on this particular page, Jeff? Are you going to put one more up on this page, and then you're going to switch?
I think so.
Okay, so would that be suitable for you? Do you feel like that's a good idea? Let's finish this page. Okay, I do have a comment on human services spending, if you've got a moment. So when I was first elected, I think it was like 1/10 of 1%. It was about 25,000, or it was minimal compared to the 1%. And so during the time that I've been here in my tenure, it was raised up to 1%. And when it was raised to 1%, our general fund was only around 20 million. So human services spending was 200,000 at that time. So I feel like human services spending should not be eliminated, but I would think it would be useful to establish some priorities a little bit along the lines of what my colleague said, that you still have some priorities out there that are impactful as well, instead of sending $1,000 to 25 people or whatever, that you have an impact on a small handful of very essential services in town. That's my take. I don't think eliminating the entire thing totally. I think there needs to be a value that our human services spending still makes a value statement from the council and the community. So that's where I'm at on that.
So just an interesting note on the human services, we actually got to the 1% by using ARPA funds. So,
yes, that's right. I remember that.
So,
okay, so it's not sustainable.
interesting. And then advisory committees, this is, we have a contract for a consultant to do one advisory committee. We have, we have staff that staffs different committees. That we're, again, not ideal, not a fun conversation, but we do have a number of committees that are advisory. Ultimately, the council is the decision maker. So is there an opportunity to save costs by relying on the city council to make the decisions without, advisory committee support? So I think that summarizes that one. Not, no one wants to do it, but we're talking about, options. So there we go.
All right, so Councilmember Oxiger, then Councilmember Harris.
Can you list what those advisory committees are?
All of the council committees are, so we have Citizens Advisory Committee, we have Senior Services, Human Services, Arts Commission, there's more, I can't think of them off the top of my head.
Well, it would be nice to know what, as we come to make these decisions, which committees we're talking about. Do we have to eliminate all of them? Or could there be, we need to prioritize which ones we, might want to keep. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is just, initial talking point. Appreciate your comments. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then also, I mean, when you're talking about the Arts Commission, I think we'll talk about that later. They have a decent budget for the events that they put on. So eliminating that piece, if we were to get rid of the budget too, would provide a greater savings, but, also come with equivalent, impacts. So.
Councilmember Harris.
That's how we lost the Public Planning Commission in 2012. And I vividly remember Bob Scheckler saying, well, we can always bring it back. And my lesson is basically you drop things and they don't come back.
Any other questions? Okay, go ahead, Jeff. Oh, we wanted to finish the fourth bullet and then take a break. Oh, that was the whole conversation right there. All right, so let's take a 10-minute break and reconvene, or 9-minute break and reconvene at 8:15. So, just very quickly, I made a decision. 1 minute left before we reconvene. All right, if council members in attendance could take your seats, we will reconvene and continue on with the slides with our finance director, Jeff Friend. Thank you so much.
Tara even warned me it was, okay. The next slide begins with ending the Beering Cares animal control contract, which we pay $100,000 a year.
So I know what the mayor just mentioned is there is an executive session scheduled for tonight. All of these, probably, I think maybe we just walk through each one.
Okay.
Just as kind of a, an introduction, and then, letting the council know, the public know, these are potential cuts that are being proposed. And so I'll just note this one, the Beering Cares contract, briefly, talk to the chief about this. Again, another cut that's not ideal. This would eliminate essentially, responding to dog on loose, or, loose dog, kind of the more mundane animal control things. Officers would respond to dog bite, those kind of things, any sort of crime. But, for the other piece, we just wouldn't have an animal control option. It would be, go to Facebook, report it on the lost dog, something like that. That's what the outcome would be.
Okay, followed by ending watering downtown flower baskets for a savings of $40,000. So I should just read through the rest of them.
And I guess it's not just watering, planting, watering. Yeah. If we stopped watering, I guess that would solve the problem as well. But yes.
This is freeze general fund vacancies, $230,000. There's two positions that make up the $230,000 were vacant, an IT director and then also a senior events planner at the time. Retain one-time sales and B&O tax. So we are, to my understanding, expecting more projects that would be contributing to the one-time sales and B&O tax. So we have it estimated at $275,000. If we retained it, then we retained it in the general fund and would not transfer it out to the capital project fund that retains the one-time sales and B&O tax. Then reduce the cost of living adjustment. This relates back to the 3.8%. It was the CPIU for June in Seattle. We did take a poll of neighboring cities. Neighboring cities are doing between 3.5% and 3.8%, which is relevant as, our wages, which have been, salary and benefits have been a topic lately, but there is being competitive in the job market. So there might be an adjustment here or there. We also have bargaining units that we have contractual obligations to as well. So that's a little bit on the cost of living adjustment. The $840,000 for that's in the packet is just basically the value of everybody in the general fund getting the 3.8% increase. Eliminate city currents, $60,000 annually. It's $15,000 a quarter to print that. And then annually, the postage is about $20,000.
Excuse me, just for a moment, we do have a question.
Can you back up to the
Councilmember
previous slide?
Oxier.
Okay.
Okay, you mentioned that we have contracts coming up. Which contracts do we have coming up?
The Police Guild, their contract expires, I believe, at the end of this year, and the Teamsters as well. They're timed usually the same 3-year term.
Okay, thank you.
So just to reiterate or to clarify here, all told, how many bullets do you think that you have ahead of you right now, Jeff? 50 more, 30 more, pardon? How many bullet points? 8 more.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Okay, so if you could take notes, and let's go through all of them, and then ask him at the end. Okay.
Thank you.
Ready, set, go.
Eliminating Channel 21, annual cost of $50,000. Reducing training and travel budget for departments in the general fund, just an estimate of $60,000. And then this, again, is the, what we've mentioned, the assessments, the money that the general fund puts aside for vehicle replacement. In the packet does say like up to 1.1 million, but we've had discussions today with the police and public works and finance where we think we can save $650,000 and still replace 5 police cars. Computer replacement, we're looking into that. There's 2 main software that is on the schedule in the Excel workbook to be replaced in 2025. Doesn't necessarily mean it needs to. So we're taking a look at that, but that assessment for money to be set aside for that is about $304,000. And in vehicle maintenance, that assessment is about $326,000. And of course, if you're not going to replace your cars, you can't choose to not maintain them because then you're just going to have a fleet that's going to fall apart. So that's when I talk about we're balancing just the needs that are there and not, trying to, have a long-term focus, not just say, oh, well, we can cut this number and then move on.
I think just one point on that is regardless of, I think we're taking these numbers right now and we're looking at them with our staff to figure out how much we can bring these numbers down, but then still have what we need. And so I appreciate the partnership that we've had with the police department, with Public Works about, hey, this is what we'd love to have, and this is what we have in the budget versus this is what we can live with, and this is how we can, take a vehicle that's being used for this and use it for these other things too. So there's a lot of collaboration going on right now and a lot of creative thinking. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Next one, I don't believe this is in the packet, but this was suggested today. So close the SGJU park parking and bathroom for $40,000. Cancel city-funded events, listed the Waterland Weekend, July 4th, summer concerts and park events. Increase participation fees in city programs or eliminate programs. And then finally, staff layoffs and furloughs. And that is the end of the slide presentation.
Okay, thank you. So did anybody take any further questions about these? Deputy Mayor Steinmetz, then Councilmember Harris, did you still have no? And then Councilmember Oxiger, go ahead.
Yeah, just the thought that occurred to me, is it possible to lease city vehicles, including police cars? And that way we amortize the cost out over more?
Yeah, we have leased cars.
Lease or police vehicles or no?
We have leased, like a real police car, you put in all the equipment, right? Right. So you don't want to modify a leased car, I don't think, because then you'd have to take it all apart and stuff. But we leased like the recruiter vehicle, and I think we ended up buying that.
Right, that's just within the last month.
So we could certainly look at leasing vehicles, but I think, I mean, we would consider anything, but I think for police, so you're going to put the lights on and all that stuff, so you're modifying them so much that.
Nobody out there has a police car model they'll lease to you, anything like, something like that?
I don't believe so. Not fully equipped.
Okay. Oh,
Deputy Mayor Steinmetz, excuse me, Deputy Mayor Steinmetz, in answer to your question, it is possible to lease vehicles, but when we look at the, I'm new here and going over the fleet right now with the chief and others. With police vehicles, it doesn't really make sense because of a lot of the internal equipment that goes in, the cost of putting those in and out if you were leasing vehicles. But when you take a look at how long the city of Des Moines, with its maintenance program, has kept its vehicles over time, and the size of the city with not a lot of miles going back and forth in the city, leasing may not pencil out. There might be a few vehicles where it might, but generally speaking, because we keep our vehicles, some of our vehicles are 2008s, 2009s, 2010s, we get a longer term lifetime because of the size of the city, the mileage stays low. So leasing could be beneficial if we were turning them over a lot, but we're not. So we're keeping them long term and getting as much as we can out of them.
it sounds like it's been seriously looked at, and that's kind of what I was trying to figure out, if that option had been explored. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Oxiger.
So we've attached monetary values to all of these other things, but except for this. Can we get some indications of how much we're spending on these things?
For which one?
The cancel city funded events and increased participation fees. Can we get some idea of what we're paying for Waterland Weekend, what we're paying for July 4, and?
So the drones for July 4th is like 90,000, but that's not paid from the general fund. That's paid out of the lodging tax fund. So that would stay the same, but we can take a look, I think, at the police cost for staffing that and get some numbers together for the other items. And then the next item is just kind of general, so that's why it doesn't have anything. And then I think once we look at everything, I think part of the reason that we have, staff layoffs on there is we're most likely we're gonna see what we can do and then back into that probably as a last resort. Because I don't think we won't be able to avoid that, but we want to make sure we do everything we can to preserve those positions, the ones that we can.
I'm simply asking, can we get some figures?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that last page? Okay, do you have something next? Or this is the whole presentation here, Jeff? Okay, thanks. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I'll just close it out by saying that, again, these are options. We've been discussing things since January. We've put in place the items that we can. These are items that need council approval, and really, to build our budget for 2025. So again, as far as the budget process goes, we'll continue to be discussing this with the council, with the finance committee. We'll have to have several, I believe the city manager's recommended budget is due October 1st.
Yeah, the state laws.
And then, so we'll obviously keep in contact with the council. And then after that, we'll start having public hearings on this. So we'll be able to hear from the public. And then, of course, we're building this budget assuming that the levy lid lift fails. And so that would be the vote in November. And if anything were to change, then obviously we would need to pivot a little bit with the budget and make some changes. We have to have the budget adopted by the end of the year, and it has to be balanced. That's the timeline we're working on. So, thank you. Thank you.
Question, Deputy Mayor Steinmetz.
Just a comment, Catherine, if you're watching, I hope we're not scaring you off tonight. This can be work. We'll do the work.
And I will say that, with the directors that we've been working with, they're all here tonight. We've been working collaboratively as a team, to figure this stuff out, and we'll continue to do that. So.
Well, my thanks. And honestly, for all of you, every week or every meeting, the directors are always here to support whatever's going on. And some of them sit through meeting after meeting after meeting and never get called on. And so I appreciate y'all being here. Thank you. Okay, if there aren't any other comments here or questions, moving to the next item, City Manager? Yes, all right. Next item is, the council is going to dismiss to executive session in accordance with RCW 42.30.1101G in order to discuss the parameters of a new city manager contract. The session is expected to last 30 minutes, which is until 8:59. And the council is not expected to take any action before concluding the meeting tonight. Any other action after the executive session? Okay. I think so, yes.